thecreativenotcorporate.com proudly presents The Creative, Not Corporate Pop Culture and Media Podcast, chronicling the ongoing pop culture battle between the creative minds of music, movies, TV, and radio, and the corporate suits that control them. Now, please welcome your host, a digital media professional with over 25 years experience in all forms of traditional and digital media, not to mention managing two of the largest online radio podcast networks on earth. Here is the king of podcasts. Hello, everybody. Another Creative Not Corporate Pop Culture Media Podcast here for all of you. And so glad to have you on the show, listening to me bring this out before I go ahead and make a trip to Phoenix this weekend for another United States Cannabis Conference and Expo. So if you're happening to be in the area and it is open to the public, if you are so inclined, you'd like to go ahead and join us there, you can go learn more at usccexpo.com, usccexpo.com. It's all right there for you. So if you decide to go and come along, let me know, and we'll love to have you. But, you know, or if you're going to be in the, basically, if you're going to be in the Phoenix area, just give me a heads up. If you are interested in being a guest here on the program, or you're interested in learning any more about what's going on when it comes to being a guest and, you know, telling us about your story, the creativity that you're offering to pop culture media, just what you're doing in terms of movies, music, TV, radio especially, because it's what I do a lot of. I'd love to hear your story. So when you get a chance, please do give me a ring up and let's talk. So my email address is kingofpodcasts@yahoo.com, kingofpodcasts@yahoo.com. On the show tonight, I'm going to start off with a few things when it comes to music and radio. College kids and radio. And do college kids listen to radio? Also, a story I learned about how can radio and podcasting work together. The rapper J. Cole talks to the issues of cancel culture, the trouble with fame and schooling young rappers, because obviously rap is still such a popular genre of music. Never thought, people were surprised that it's still lasting as long as it has today, 35 plus years later. And we'll talk about Spotify doing a global culture initiative to boost regional artists from around the world. Some really cool stuff that I like about that. And then a few things when it comes to television, and we'll talk about night school. But first off, let's go and talk about music and radio. As I was just mentioning, taking a look at the Billboard Hot 100 for the week ending October 6th. So I'm just going to give you the top 5. Killshot Eminem starts off. Then you got In My Feelings and Drake moves down 2 to 4. Better Now, Post Malone rises from 5 to 3. Lucid Dreams, Juice WRLD rises from 4 to 2. And second week in a row for Maroon 5. And Girls Like You making it to number 1. There you go. Now moving along, let's go into some other things that are going on with music and radio. First off, there was a story I got from RadioInc.com, one of these little industry sites. Every once in a while, there might be a story that might actually catch my interest. So I check out and see what's going on with it. And there was a conference, the RAIN conference that recently happened. You know, they had a podcasting part of the conference, and for some reason, they didn't let me be a part of it. You know, listen, man, International Podcast Day was yesterday. As I record this tonight, October 1st, about to be pushed out October 2nd. International Podcast Day was yesterday. I had to say to myself, king of podcasts here. I've been doing this since 2005. I've had not one podcast conference out there, not one offer me an invite or anything to go out to one of these shows. I don't mean not to speak, but how about to let me come up and network with you guys, huh? How about throwing your boy a free pass here? Come on now. What is wrong with you? You guys think you know all the podcasting that there is to know? The end-all, be-all podcasting? Why don't you talk to somebody that's done 20, 25,000 podcasts in his career? The guy has been doing it for 13 plus years. Just saying. So they had a conference last week, and 7 days ago, they actually had college students from the University of Central Florida take the stage for the Gen Z panel and asked if they were ever listening to the radio, if they ever listened to the radio. And what they said is this. One student says, radio has become obsolete. I mean, no disrespect. I have this argument a lot with my mom. She plays the radio and I tell her we have streaming now. There's no need for radio. If we ran out of the internet, I would use the radio. I would listen to Apple Music or on YouTube. Another student, it's very rare I listen to the radio. It's usually because my aux cord isn't working. Hasn't gotten Bluetooth yet. I remember having that, my 2009 Honda Accord, that aux cord and, those things. The student goes on to say, nothing seems to cater to me, and commercials are annoying unless they pique my interests. Next. I'll listen to the radio in the car if I need to charge my phone. I'll put it on sometimes. I know what music I like, so there's no point using the radio. I use Spotify Premium so I don't have to use commercials. So I don't have commercials. Another, I'll listen to the radio a lot when I go back home to visit my parents. I'll listen to sports talk radio with my dad. I listen because I know the radio presets back home. Here, I haven't taken the time to find the stations. I change the station whenever I hear commercials. How about that? And when it comes to remarks about radio, all the students say they get the majority of their news from Twitter. That's how I get my news, believe it or not. Another thing I thought I'd bring up is, can radio and podcasting come together? There was a session that was done at a trade show also last week. This is from radioworld.com. They talked about how this was talked about. So there was a panel that was used called the Podcast Boom, exploring the topic with a panel comprised of podcasting talent and management. Norm Pattis, chairman and CEO of Podcast One. Caitlin Bristow, podcast host from Podcast One. Elena D. Smith, national radio and podcast host for Westwood One. Mario Lopez from Premier Networks, former host of Extra, Saved by the Bell fame, you know who he's talking about. And multi-platinum recording artist, actress, author, entrepreneur, and representing the talent side of this argument is Jewel. And then Darren Davis, president of iHeartMedia Networks Group, and Suzanne Grimes, the EVP of marketing for Cumulus and the president for Westwood One. So a few things that we got pointed out. I'll take from Norm Pattis. He says, what is the importance of podcasts to radio? So the distinction was made between national and local podcasts and answering. Quote, you can't just turn segments of local radio shows into podcasts. They have very limited value. Radio hosts need to create original content for their podcasts. In doing so, they can extend to both the station's brand and their own. Yeah, many people forget that there is far more money in local radio than national. Then, a question was asked, how is podcast management supposed to deal with the lower number of commercials in podcasts? Should it be recognized as an important difference between podcasting and radio, or should more spots be added? So, an argument was made that there should be higher pricing for the fewer podcast commercials, and limited commercial load ought to be maintained. All the panelists agreed that audience measurement in podcasting is an important area for improvement. The traditional method of measuring downloads or RSS feeds can be misleading, and that the state-of-the-art seems to be proprietary algorithms, although more work remains to be done. The bottom line is, how can these metrics give more value to advertisers for their podcast dollars? Okay. Half of that conversation was about how to make money. Whereas, again, these people that are in either radio or podcasting right on in this very panel, they don't think about the fact that it's about the content. Okay? And the fact that we have certain things where, we get the interviews, we get the commercials, right? And we get programming that's put together and compacted. It's not so much that it has to be more stuff that needs to be added. Is that whatever you put into a podcast needs to be compacted and you need to cut the fat. Okay, radio, with the time that you're given, you are doing two things. Number one, you are trying to engage an audience that is coming in and coming out of the programming in an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour period. Number two, so what you're doing with that, number one, is you are just repeating some of the same stuff, or you're resetting whatever you're talking about to something else. And number two, you're having to stretch the time out because of things that you're talking about. You might bring up points, but might be some things that you might talk about that, if you were to edit it down and kind of compartmentalize what you're talking about, that's what's more important. That's what I also think about when it comes to podcasting, that when you're doing shows, if you're doing a podcast, honestly, like I know some shows, they can get away with going very long-winded and letting it go out there, okay? Joe Rogan's a best example of that. Well, he can go ahead and do a show, and he could just say, okay, I'm going to do 2 hours, 3 hours with this guest. He's just going to ask as many questions as he can think of until he runs out. Basically it, which is fine. I mean, you get a lot of stuff covered, but I always feel like for me, you know, I've taken some time to learn about certain things when it comes to doing radio shows, doing podcasts, okay? When you're doing, you got to keep in mind that the person listens to radio as much as he listens to podcasting, okay? If you're doing radio, remember, you're going to do it for an audience that's tuning in, tuning out, or they're multitasking or doing something else. So not paying complete attention. In podcasting, I believe people are not necessarily multitasking or just kind of tuning in, tuning out of what's being said. Because if you're doing a show, you're doing it concentrated. You want the best of the best. Okay? You want the best bits of what's going on. So you don't necessarily have to run the entire show. If you need to go and use the existing product, then somebody needs to go ahead and take the time and edit the show down and only put the unguents of what's most important and put into a show. That's what needs to happen. But, you know, to do a show that's an hour, 2 hours long, it can be tough. But it's not tough in terms of not being able to know what to talk about and what you can talk about. It's just you need to go and keep in mind of the audience. Now, for what I do in podcasting for the 2 radio stations that I run, you know, we run, for every 30 minutes, we run roughly 4 minutes of commercials. So we get 26 minutes of programming. You know, there's always certain things that you learn about from all the research and all the things that we do with our programming. Number one, we always, when you get to the open of the show, you get to it. You get to the point, if you're going to be a little bit long-winded, you're going to do an intro to a show that's going to be a little more than 30 seconds, and you just need to make sure that you get your point across as to what you're doing the show for and something about it. And listen, place commercials as you want, but the truth is, the more sincere, the more endorse-worthy they are coming from you, or when the commercials are good. And when the commercials are produced and they're fun and they're interesting and they're dynamic, that's a different story. And that's what's good. So you need to keep that in mind as well. So those kind of things you do to make a better podcast. And yes, listen, if you want to do something where you're going to bring in more money for commercials, well, God bless you if you can. But what you need to do, what most advertisers want to do is, listen, you know, you don't necessarily have to have the metrics to get people on board. What you need to do is be able to get your audience to be interactive. You have to make your audience ultra engaging. It's tough to do. You can do it through social media. You can do it through other things. You can do things where you create a premium podcast so that if you think your programming is so good and you get something like that, most people will do that. That's what they normally do. Most podcasters that I know that are not part of a big company, they find Patreon, they find other things so they can go and get themselves out there and be noticed, which is fine. You can do that and it works. But what it comes down to is that's the only thing you can do. It's tough. It's very tough. So if you're going to do the big scale podcast and try to really build something out so you can get real money for it, if you're one of these corporate types, well, what you have to do is what talk radio does. Or they're using the talk radio model right now. So the idea is, okay, so here we go. We're going to have this promo code. And this is a way for us to track and see if people are coming to the website. And in return, they get a little nugget. They get a little bit of a discount or something extra that they get as part of their purchase, whatever it is, or subscribing to something. Those things are what people feel like what works. Instead of trying to wait for ROI, which, you know, listen, if you're not a good salesperson, then you're making people reliant on what you got to do to bring people aboard. That's the one thing that's happening is that with podcasting, just keep in mind too, you know, in radio, you could try to get away with some metrics and kind of keep it hidden, keep it vague. But what's most important is you have to also make people realize too that, they did make the point that audience measurement in podcasting is tough. And the problem is that you would think that even though you have all your stuff on computers, downloads and all that don't matter. But I hate to tell you something, but that's the only way it does. What are you going to do? Another sampling like a Nielsen? That doesn't make sense either. Nielsen's already giving you a horrible sample trial of what your programming is on terrestrial radio. So that's horrible. And then you have companies that are trying to promote and offer podcast analytics, which are not much better. It's just the way it is. Nobody has a proper way of tracking down their programming and getting the most out of the what's out there. They're just not. So it's going to be tough. And it's tough for people to go ahead and make that point and to fix that. So what are you going to do? Right? Keep that in mind. It's really tough to go and take care of. Now, when it comes to those of you that are trying to make a podcast on here, let me tell you something. You don't want to do it like a radio show. Like you take there are the elements you take from radio, but not the radio of today. This is the most important thing. What you don't want to do with a podcast is do what radio does today. Your morning show, sports radio kind of deal. You don't want to do that because it is the cheap way of doing things in order to make themselves money. Okay? It's doing as little effort in some cases because it's behooving to the creators, the content creators. They're not allowed to have the full creativity. And even in podcasting, they are under control as well. So keep that in mind. Now, I'm just saying to everybody, if you're going to do it where you're going to have, if you're going to do something where you're going to have, have a podcast, concentrate it. Make it the most that it could possibly be. That's all there is to it. You make that work, it'll do very well. So when you listen to these people, really take it as the grain of salt that it is. Like I could go into tangents and really go into talking about what I think podcasting and radio and what you could take from that and how to build a good podcast. I'm not the one that ever did one of those things before, but I mean, I've talked about it. Now, let me take a minute here before I continue here. It's something I do need to make mention of, and I didn't say it at the start of the show, but I think right now is a good time to talk about it. I did talk on a show called Podcasting Mastery, and I put that up for people on the Creative Corporate site. You can listen to the episode when I was on there with the host, James Bartell. Now, what I want to tell you is something that was quite tragic that really affected me over the weekend. So, James Martell, the host of that Podcasting Mastery program, he is somebody I've worked with since 2010 on the webmasterradio.fm series, The Affiliate Buzz. And he had been doing the show and been podcasting since 2003 or 2004. Well, he unfortunately suffered a real medical tragedy this past Tuesday, whereby, and this is, I didn't know this by the time I was doing my radio show, doing the podcast last week, that he suffered a brain aneurysm, which caused a stroke. Stroke causing excessive bleeding to his brain, a lot of hemorrhaging. And he was then sent directly to an ICU unit where he was then put on life support. Was not expected to make it to the night. I did not know what was going on when it came to him. I had heard that he was in a coma and that he was taken off life support. The family decided not to do that, which I understand where they're coming from. Totally understand it. And that by later that night, with his family around him, his wife of 39 years, his 4 children, and his grandchildren at his bedside, he peacefully passed away. I don't know what his age was. I want to say it was in his late 50s. But unfortunately, he passed away, and a good friend of mine in the podcasting business is no longer here. Hopefully in a couple of weeks, after I come back from Phoenix, I will get to go and do a proper tribute for James on his radio program, the Affiliate Buzz. And, I'll pass it along if any of you are interested in listening to that. I'll let you know when that's going to be. But I want to dedicate this week's program to the life and memory of James Martell. Really an affiliate marketing expert. Pretty good deal in business to business and tech and digital marketing. He was a straight shooter, great guy, class act, a real pro, and gonna miss him a lot. I used to do a show live on Thursday nights, Thursday evenings, 5:00 on the radio station. And when it comes about 10 minutes to 5 and I'm going to give him a call on Skype, the first time I do that and I realize he's not there, it's going to hurt. So, I offer up this podcast as a tribute to James Martell and to his memory. And I give my best, my thoughts and prayers to Arlene, his wife, his kids, his family, and all those who were touched and loved by him. Okay. All right, let's move along to other things. Now, J. Cole. That's a good way to go ahead and circumvent and segue out of something not good to talk about. J. Cole was recently interviewed by Billboard magazine in a very interesting article about a lot of things. Now, J. Cole's not the typical rapper that we're getting out there these days. He actually is quite interesting. Now, he's not so much as mainstream as Drake, but he's an interesting artist altogether and very creative-minded. One of the more creative-minded artists that are out there. And I thought his story was actually quite interesting that we should bring up a little bit here. Now, most recently, we know that he had a album of the year freestyle, and the album KOD, which was a recent Billboard 200 #1 album. He has a new project called The Off Season he's working on as well. J. Cole was asked a number of things. Now, interesting to get into the mind of this rapper about what goes on with him. One of the things he mentions is this, quote, "Even though clearly I am one, I don't live my life like a celebrity." Now, as a kid, J. Cole spent summers in Dallas with his father, an Army vet who had separated from his mother, a United States Postal Service worker. Cole, his mother, and his older brother, Zach, relocated from military base in Frankfurt, Germany, where Jermaine Lamar Cole was born in 1985 in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Now, he is back in North Carolina, living in Raleigh, North Carolina, with his wife and toddler son. There are some people that talk about how certain rappers don't make themselves notice and don't get a lot of publicity because they don't talk a lot. They don't offer a lot of interviews, don't offer the exposure. Now, J. Cole himself has only done a few interviews in the past 2 years, most recently with the 18-year-old Miami rapper Lil Pump to bury the hatchet following a minor dust-up that included on the KOD track 1985, a paternal rebuke to the SoundCloud generation of rappers, and radio host Angie Martinez. Quote, might he sell a few more albums or get a few more clicks if he talked more? Maybe, Martinez writes in an email, but she continues, quote, "In a time where people chronically overshare, there aren't many artists that make people stop what they're doing to hear what they have to say. Cole holds one of those few prestigious slots." He makes an interesting point about, he swears to God, he's been thinking about how to get unfamous, but he knows it's impossible. He says, instead, he's just looking to stay purposefully relevant because it could be worse. You could be irrelevant and still be famous. Interesting things for those of you new up-and-coming artists that are coming up. He was asked, do you think it benefits celebrities to only engage with media on their terms? He says, it's hard for me to answer. I live very low-key, but also accessible. So I can't even speak for them. I go to the store. I go play ball. You wouldn't know because it's not anything newsworthy, but I see real people every day. When you mention celebrities, I view them as a fan who's like, oh, wow, that's Beyonce. That's Taylor Swift. And I don't view myself in the same light. Now, I talked about the song 1985, which if you didn't hear it on the KOD album, one of the best tracks there is, and he just goes after people. I know Eminem went even farther with Kamikaze, but I really think the 1985 was a very well balanced, even keeled, confrontation of the younger rappers that are just kind of getting brought in, and they don't know what's going to happen to them. They're going to get left out in the dust, and they're getting used and abused by the handlers that bring them on, that give them the fame. And they need to watch out about that, which that to me was very important. And I thought that was a very interesting and a good way of mentoring those that are coming in. I thought that was really well done. Very cool. Now, he says, your criticisms were fair, but some people saw 1985 as finger wagging. Do you think the song came down too hard on the SoundCloud generation? He says, quote, I don't look at it as being harsh. I look at it being a rap response record. It's not even someone specific. It's a group of people who were on some fuck J. Cole shit, which when I started peeking my head back into what was going on was a shock. But even while I made the song, I was fucking with these kids. I was a fan. I was running around playing Lil Pump just because I wanted to understand what it was. And the more I understood, I was like, damn, I was writing that song from a place of like smacking your little brother. I still love you, but I'm going to smack you. Now, again, politics, he is a very politically polarizing figure. And one of the things he talked about, which I'm trying to get my head wrapped around, is cancel culture. Now, I'm trying to figure out what cancel culture is. Let me see what the definition of it real quick before I say anything. So here is what cancel culture is said to be. What has arisen from the newfound foundation of political correctness is something called cancel culture. It is essentially when people who have said or done problematic things, either now or in the past, are decidedly canceled, and people no longer support them on their endeavors. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So like the Me Too movement, basically, when people are brought in or they have said things in the past, whatever it might be, the Louis C.K.'s of the world, I mean, it goes across the board. There's announcers, there's people that say things they get in trouble for. It's the political correctness, like they said, where, there is zero tolerance into what you say or what you might do in order to offend people. That's what he's talking about. Now, cancel culture, when he talks about that, if there's legitimacy, he says, well, that's tough because we're talking about black women. If it was a white woman involved with these allegations, and sadly, I'm realizing as I'm talking to you, maybe people wouldn't cancel them just as quick, but labels will be forced to cancel. Because white outrage is way more powerful than black outrage, unfortunately. When white people start getting outraged about this type of shit, then maybe something will happen. Now, part of it was being talked about prior to the relationship between Nas and Khalees, which was a very domestically not good relationship, if you could just say that. Now, despite his discomfort with fame, people look to him, they say, as a sort of a moral authority. Someone said to him at a charity event that he was the very Harry Belafonte of rap. And when asked if he wanted that responsibility, he says no, because there's a long history of activism and standing for something, and I have not done enough. I'm too selfish for that. And one day, I hope that I'm not. Right now, it's about me, family, and the music or any creative pursuits that I do. That's selfish. I hope I'll do more for the community. People give me props now, but the truth is, I live my life very selfishly. The little shit I did today, that's nothing. Harry Belafonte put his money where his mouth is and in the streets. I haven't reached that point yet. Now, talking about younger rappers and trying to reach back to those that are coming up, he did talk to Triple X Tentacion, and he was asked about if he knew the artist and how he talked about how he had a strong desire to be a better person. And J. Cole mentioned he spoke to him on FaceTime one day in February for about 3 hours. His management reached out to him and asked if he could FaceTime or call me. It was a super intense confirmation. He left a mark on me just as a person. So when asked what he wanted to talk about, he said he started the conversation literally on some, like, he didn't even say hello. He started off basically saying, I'm not on your level yet. He was talking about spiritually and mentally. And that was intense because I was like, I'm not on or no level. He was praising me while also saying he was going to achieve whatever it is he felt that I had. I've dealt with mentally ill people in my life before, many of them. And right away, I noticed that this kid is super passionate and smart. But I can also see that he was so deep in his mind. When I found out about the abuse allegations against him, my first response was, man, I hope maybe one day I'll get a chance to talk to this kid and figure out if there's any place I can help. Because anybody who would do the shit that he did, hurt people. I've walked through prisons and talked to these dudes who got life. They took someone's life at 16 or 17 years old. You haven't had a chance to process your trauma at that age. I'm going to be sympathetic to a kid who's clearly been through so much fucked up shit and he inflicted this on someone else. So, the thing is, it's a different way of mentoring because when you have the creativity of certain people that are out there now in music, you got to ask yourself, these younger kids, what are the things they've gotten themselves into and what have they experienced that is really crazy? It's something really amazing now to behold because it's so complex. Now, part of it is because the culture has created that, for whatever reason. Political correctness has created this reason. And it's interesting that he's one of the few guys that even offered to help. But the truth is, who's out there to help anybody in the creative industry? And that's the one thing that's got to be said, is that if you are creative and you are looking to do things, that don't bust down and push away those that are out there that might be able to help you. There are peers that are there to help you. And, if you are a peer, if you're someone that's trying to help out somebody younger and mentor them, yes, absolutely. It's going to be tough for you to go and do something where you're going to, you have to play a very delicate balancing game as to what you should be able to tell them in order to get them to see the right path. Or if you can't, isolate them and put them down and think, well, they just don't know anything. They want to really know that they know anything, and they're not necessarily so easy to deal with it as we do. That's one thing you got to keep in mind. And that's one thing I think people should keep in mind altogether when it comes to creativity. When you have anybody that's really creative and you're trying to bring them under your wing or you're trying to talk to somebody else, listen, you can't hold them back for what they're going to do. And also you got to play a delicate balance game from saying, hey, I've been through what you were going through. I know what you're going through when it comes to trying to create this script or create this music or do something else. And, people will only take their pointers only as much as they want. And that's tough to put on people. But here's the thing. You want to be able to people that are the vocal voice that are able to get and penetrate and get inside these people's heads. Because, J. Cole doesn't say anything about this, but let me just be honest with you. The 1985 album, that single he did on KOD was very important because that was indicative. And that's why I wanted to talk to him. Talk about this particular article that Billboard did, is because I wanted to get inside this kid's mind. J. Cole, okay, for what it is, pretty grounded. Definitely is his own person. But what's most important is that he does have a grounding on reality. On his reality anyway. And the 1985 album, or single, he brings up a lot of things that should be said that should be noticed, because the kids that are out there, that if they don't realize what's going on, there's a lot of things that could go bad. And the thing is, you need to be grounded and you need to realize what's going on with you before corporate types and those that are looking to make money off of you take you for what you are and abuse the privilege. That could very well happen. Just keep that in mind, okay? That could very well happen. And so I look at the lyrics for 1985. He talks about this, and here's a lot of cursing, but let's go through what it says. All these, and I am not going to say the word, Papa now is young, Everybody say the music that they make is dumb. I remember when I was 18, money, pussy parties, I was on the same thing. You got to give a boy a chance to grow some. Everybody taking like they know something these days. Ends acting woke, but they broke them. I respect the struggle, but you all fronting these days. Man, they're barely old enough to drive. To tell them what they do, who the fuck am I? I heard one of them diss me. I'm surprised. I ain't tripping. Listen good to my reply. Come here, little man. Let me talk with you. See if I can paint for you the larger picture. Congrats, because you made it out your mama's house. I hope you make enough to buy your mama a house. I see your watch icy and your whip foreign. I got some good advice. Never quit touring. Because that's the way we eat here in this rap game. I'm fucking with your funky little rap name. I hear your music, and I know that raps change. A bunch of folks would say that's a bad thing because everything's commercial and it's pop now. Trap drums is the shit that's hot now. See, I've been on a quest for the next wave, but never mind, that was just a segue. I must say by your songs, I'm unimpressed. Hey, but I love to see a black man get paid. Plus, you're having fun and I respect that. But have you ever thought about your impact? And then, he does take a point, like I said, it's indirectly talking about the handlers, the people that are going to be around and enjoying the fame while it happens. But that's the whole point, is that the fame becomes this drug. And then, the people that are managing and making this fantasy possible, they don't care how long you have it for. They'll take it for as long as you keep making money for them. They'll put that out there, but then they won't look after you on the back end, which is very important with rap artists and for music artists in general. Who's looking out for them now? Okay. In the song, he says, you hit the next city, collect your money when it's due. You're getting that paper, swimming in bitches. I don't blame you. You ain't thinking about the people that's looking like me and you. True, you got better shit to do. You could have bought a crib with all that bread you done blew. I know you think this type of revenue is never ending, but I want to take a minute just to tell you that ain't true. One day, them kids that's going to listen, grow up, and get too old for that shit that you made blow up. Now, your show's looking light because you don't show up, which unfortunately means the money slow up. Now, you scrambling and hoping to get hot again, but you forgot you only popped because you was riding trends. Now, you're old news and you're going through regrets because you never bought that house, but you got a Benz and a bunch of jewels and a bunch of shoes and a bunch of fake friends. I ain't judging you. I'm just telling you what's probably going to happen when you're rapping about the shit you're rapping about. It's a faster route to the bottom. I wish you good luck. I'm hoping for your sake that you ain't dumb as you look. But if it's really true what people are saying and you call yourself playing with my name, then I know you really fucked. Trust, I'll be around forever because my skills is tip top. To any amateur ends that want to get rocked, just remember what I told you when you shit flop. In 5 years, you're going to be on Love and Hip Hop. Bam. There is not enough mentorship out there to help the artists that are finding their way up. Because that's one thing that's lacking in general among everybody. Where is the mentorship to bring new comedians up to the front or new dramatic actors and actresses? Like, really, some of the real creativity and differences that are out there, opening the doors, where is that? Because it is tougher and tougher to find. And not only that, when you have young and up and coming artists that have, great ideas coming up, first of all, are the ideas going to be good? Because are they going to come from a good place? Are they going to be comfortable? Are they going to be in a good spot where they're going to be, where it's not going to look bad? Like it's going to, where they're not going to be coming from a very bad place in their mind or how they think. Are they going to be open-minded? I mean, honestly, are they going to be politically correct? Are they going to censor themselves? They're going to stop themselves from finding and bending the envelope and pushing the envelope on what they could really be. Those kind of things need to be considered. And I thought an interview from someone like J. Cole makes the point. Because in this culture, it is tough to be creative. Totally is. So keep that in mind, folks. Spotify, doing a quick little story I want to make about launching their Global Cultures Initiative. It's an initiative to boost regional artists from around the world. So it will expertly curate playlists featuring popular tracks from diasporic communities around the world. Among the playlists, there'll be different playlists. It'll be Arab, African, Indian, or Desi, and Latino, with the latter two having launched already, and the first two launching in the coming weeks. And they're also looking to set launch in North Africa and the Middle East in November. In addition to these culture-specific playlists, a key part of the initiative is the Global X playlist, which combines worldwide hits with multicultural crossover tracks. It's combined as a crossover of a mix of genres, a mix of languages. And that's interesting. So the head of Global Culture says it could be like a song like a Despacito remix that crosses over to the rest of the world. So that's pretty good. You know, they talked about the idea of creating, we always did find music from other countries if they found their way over. And I think one of the best places that happens right now is YouTube. But for Spotify to get in the game, I think is actually pretty interesting. It's a nice little concept. So real quickly, Night School ended up blowing everybody away when it comes to making business at the box office. Good for them. What was it, $25 million they made this week? One of the best, or $28 million. Best opening for comedy so far this year. How about that? So good for them. Warner Brothers Smallfoot, $23 million. That's the animated kids thing. Hellfest, $4.7 million. Little Women. So actually, here we go. These are the totals actually for the week. Night School, number 1. Smallfoot, number 2. The House with the Clock in the Walls, 3. Simple Favor, 4. The Nun, 5. Hellfest, 6. And I haven't been in the movies in a couple weeks. Nothing that interests me. Nothing that's interested me right now for a while. And I think the next movie I will catch will probably be in 2 weeks, and that's the what is it? The Bad Night at the El Royale. Let me see if I get the name right. I think I just butchered that name. So Bad Times at El Royale. So that's coming up actually, yes, in a week and a half. We'll have that for you. And I think it starts Thursday, October 11th. And then I think it officially launches, October 12th. So that'll be the next movie I'll catch. And so far, pretty good reviews by Rotten Tomatoes. So we'll keep in mind of that. So a couple little things when it comes to TV. Just saw that Mayans MC is actually coming back for a second season. Congrats. Queen of the South is coming back for season 4. I love to see the fact that the witches from Coven came back. The seasons are going to be put a part of this. So that'll make the season exceptionally exciting. And I noticed that Last Man Standing, people were asking about, the Fox bringing comedies back and bringing back the Tim Allen comedy. Thought it was quite interesting that it did very well in its ratings. Actually beat MacGyver for the night on Friday night. 8 million viewers for the first showing. And then the show The Cool Kids followed up with almost 7 million viewers for a Friday night. How about that? But then when it comes down to it, the only thing that's also going to beat them is Hawaii Five-0, which gets about 8 million people on their show. And then almost 9 million watching New Bloods, which was a top show on Friday nights. Otherwise, when it comes to the rest of the lineup, like I said, when looking at network TV, everybody's falling apart. Ooh, not good. And by the way, I've officially tapped out on Empire. They did the whole 2 years ahead thing. It's stupid. Out. There are just some shows that need to be done and be done for good. And I just felt like that's what went on this time around for me. And I'm done with it. I just think that Empire has jumped the shark. How many more times do we need to see complete, issues and problems go bad for this show? It's just the same thing over and over. And that was it. Just done with it. So the show got picked up for a 5th season, and I just think it's done. I don't think there's much more left to do. And it's not like the show's doing, gangbusters right now in the ratings, but there's nothing. It's really there because there's nothing left. And it's sad because, So you have the kids now all grown up. They're already kind of grown up anyway. But now Hakeem's got kids, and Jamal's kind of off into some other thing, and Audrey's in jail, and it's just like, now everybody's like more family oriented, and it's just like, they're moving ahead, and they lost the company, and it's just this whatever it is. I think some of the dynamics that they did with the show are kind of lost, and everybody has been like affected or hurt or almost to the point of death. And I think it's just enough. I think I've had enough of it. It's drama for drama, and I just feel like they're just all over the place now. There's nothing like they have when it comes to like how power is. That's what it comes down to. So anyway, we're going to leave it at that. Thank you all for listening to the show tonight and catching Creative Not Corporate like you always do. CreativeNotCorporate.com is the website. The big voice guy will tell you all about that. Hey man, I don't even put commercials on the show. I don't even put the trouble to all of you for it. I'm so nice to you guys. Now, I got to get packed for Phoenix. In the meantime, we'll talk probably late next week when I get back. My flight leaves Wednesday night. I'll be in Phoenix. And then I return back to Florida on Tuesday. And we'll see how that works out. Probably if I can try to get the show Tuesday night, I'll try to do that. Or I might just skip a day and not worry about that because the jet lag will be just something else. So I'll keep you in tune about that. So look for a show, hopefully probably this time next week or Wednesday night, going into Thursday. Let you know more about it. Until then, keep corporate away from your creative. Thank you for listening to the Creative Not Corporate Pop Culture and Media Podcast. To learn where to subscribe to the show and how to follow the King of Podcasts anywhere on social media, go to our website at creativenotcorporate.com. That's creativenotcorporate.com. The Creative Not Corporate Podcast is brought to you by Amazon. Shop where the King of Podcasts shops for everything and anything he needs by going to kingofpodcasts.com/Amazon. Also, check out the King of Podcasts' work every day at webmasterradio.fm and cannabisradio.com. And look for his other original podcast series, The Wrestling is Real Podcast. Learn about these and more at kingofpodcasts.com.